post-method era. In this course, we have talked several approaches and methods of English language teaching, and we started with the very initial stage of approaches and method, that is from the very beginning of English language teaching, or we can say the second language teaching, that several approaches and methods has been investigated. Several methods and approach has been established by linguists and researchers, how and in which way the second language can be taught. And again, there was a question that which approach or which method will be the appropriate one. And if we analyze from the very beginning that in 14th or 15th century, at the time, Latin language, German language, they had been teaching as the second language. And these are the way that is actually which language a learner will learn. That depends on the necessity. And in which way? That means we are studying English language. Why? Back in 15th or 16th or 17th century or 14th century, the scenario was not like that. People at the time didn't study English. At the time, people studied Latin language and German language, Greek language, because language of a powerful nation will be studied. And at the time it was thought that Latin language is the language of Roman Empire. Roman was the powerful nation or civilization at the time. Greek civilization was there. They are powerful in two ways. One, they had military power, Alexander the Great, and others important and powerful personalities of that Greek and Roman civilization. And for this reason, people were ready to study this language, a Latin language and Greek language, German language, like that. So what is the power? Power, that is military power on one hand, and another way that will be the economic power. Roman and Greek civilization, they did have these two kinds of power, that is military power and the economic power as well. And at the time, the scenario was that is, which will be the methods of English language teaching or Roman language teaching or Latin language teaching. They thought that means the Roman civilization, the Greek civilization, they thought that their literature is great, and for this reason their literature should be studied by the people all over the world. The person who will be teaching or reading Latin literature, Greek literature, they are supposed to be the scholars. And for this reason, at that time, that means 14th, 15th, 16th century, the scenario was that language teaching was only one reason. Language teaching was for studying the literature of great civilization, Roman civilization and the Greek civilization. And then one method, that means in order to study the literature of other language, one thing is needed, that is you have to understand the vocabulary or the word meaning of the target language. Suppose you are studying a literature written in Greek language or Latin language, so you understand the meaning of every word written in Latin or Greek language. And initially that stages grammar translation method came into existence. And this grammar translation method was intended to study the literature of Latin and Greek. And this goes up to 18th century, 17th century. The first stage, even in the first stage of 19th century, the grammar translation methods. Okay. In 1950 decades, grammar translation method was not appropriate. Why? At the time, grammar translation method focuses on vocabulary and translation. And for this reason, some other things are needed by the language learner. In grammar translation method, there was a lag. That is, what is the lag? That means grammar translation method deals reading or writing only. The grammar translation method didn't focus speaking and listening. In 1950 decades, it was a crucial, that is, oral communication is necessary. And GTM tried to lose its ground, and another method came into existence, that is direct method. Direct method came as a contrary to GTM. GTM translation is allowed, and direct method is quite opposite, no translation. Direct, everything will be discussing on the target language. Why? That means communication is necessary. Here in direct method, they put focus on oral communication, and so in another hand, they are in lack of written communication. Okay. So communication was there in direct language, but it has a leakage. That means the person, they will not be. In case of GTM, another thing is that you have to be perfect in vocabulary, structure, sentence, and everything. In direct method, a student shouldn't be the perfect in grammatical and other portion. They should achieve the oral proficiency, especially for communication. And at the early stage of the Second World War, the communication that direct method provided, the person or the learners were not happy with the prospects of direct method. So another method came, that is audiolingual method. Audiolingual method, it's called army method. So before or at the time of the Second World War, the American army, they thought that they have to understand the language, French or other language, very quickly. And for this reason, they installed that method, that is audiolingual method. So audiolingual method came into existence, and this army method. And this method also started, Second World War finished, okay, and audiolingual method got its ground less founded, less confirmed. In 1970 decades, audiolingual method also lose its ground. So it started with GTM. In a reaction towards GTM, we got direct method, and then after the direct method, we have got audiolingual method or army method. But what happened? In 1970 decades, particularly in the United States, a variety of guru-led methods emerged to fill the vacuum created by discrediting the audiolingualism, such as. But whenever, in 1970 decades, audiolingualism lost its importance, other methods came. What are the methods? That is the silent way, total physical response, suggestopedia. All we have dealt with in this course, isn't it? So this is the history. That is, some other method came into existence. While this had declined substantially by the 1990 decades. That means in 1970 decades, audiolingualism lost its appropriateness, and then silent way, Salstepedia, and total physical response came. But in 1990 decades, they also lost. That means silent way, Salstepedia, and the total physical response, they also lost their appropriateness. So the language learner thought that they will require a more appropriate method of English language teaching or second language teaching or foreign language teaching. And then there was a breakthrough, and we got some other method and approach in second language teaching, that is task-based instruction, neurolinguistics programming, and multiple intelligences. And there were several attraction of this language teaching. And at this such kind of empirical or research base, we got one method, that is CLT, in 1990 decades. That means communicative language teaching. And it continued to be several pauses and several chapters. Okay, so even all over the world at present is dominated by this CLT, that means communicative language teaching. Even in Bangladesh, we established communicative language teaching in 1993. 1993, yeah. So that was the scenario. You want to say 1996? So far as I know, 1993 in Bangladesh. Okay, so that was the history of communicative language teaching. Okay, or all the language teaching approaches and method. So we have seen these methods and approaches, that is communicative language teaching and competency. And apart from that communicative language teaching, some other methods were also explained, that competency-based language teaching, content-based instruction, that means that we have dealt with, cooperative learning or the community learning, we have dealt with the methods as well, lexical approaches, multiple intelligence, natural approaches, neurolinguistic programming, task-based language, and whole language teaching. Okay, so such kind of a whole body of language teaching came into existence after 1990 decades. Okay, and we have at present many approaches and methods in our hand, but many researchers say that none of them are appropriate enough to fulfill the demands of second language learning, because the total population of the world is increasing day by day, and the necessity of the people are multifarious. That means there are 3,500 languages all over the world. That means 3,500 language-backed people, they will be learning the language. So their requirements and their context are different, and their characteristics by a variety of interpretation as to how the principle can be applied. That means none of these methods and approaches are appropriate enough in order to the various demands of several language groups of the world. CLT might be appropriate for Bangladesh, but it might not be appropriate for Bulgaria. For Bulgaria, communicative language might be very much appropriate because they are very much friendly, and some moments they will be dealing with that. and they are very much. But in case of Bangladesh, we culturally we feel shy to communicate, and for this reason, communicative language teaching cannot be appropriate for Bangladesh, and vice versa. So our method cannot be appropriate for all language scenario, and vice versa. And all language scenario cannot be presented perfectly with the help of one method or approach. What is next? Actually, we have seen these are the history. That is, we know that is method, audiolingualism, counseling, learning, situation. These are the approach. Counseling, learning, situational language, teaching, the silent way, Wikipedia, and the total physical response. And apart from that approach, we have seen some other methods. Yeah, all are will be dealing with how and in which way we can learn language, second language or foreign language well. So that is our question. And the following question will therefore affect the extent to which a new approach or method is adopted. That means approximately 20 methods and approaches are there in our hand, but the language learners are not happy. So what can be happening to the next? What will be happening for language learning, teaching after 20 years, 25 years, after 100 years, or after 200 years? What would be the scenario? And that scenario demands the question that what will be happening in the post-method era. Okay? One linguist said that no method is appropriate. That means Prabhu, he has said that no language is appropriate. Okay? So no language, no method is appropriate for all languages. So these are the questions. What advantages does the new approach or method offer? So what will happen after 50 years? What will happen after 100 years? And what advantages does the new approach or method offer? And is it perceived to be more effective than current practices? These are the questions. How compatible is it with teachers' existing belief and attitudes, and with the organization and practices within the classroom and school? Okay, that means a question comes. A language teaching method will be applied by teachers, learners, institution, and academic planners. So if a new method comes across, so how it will be accepted by teachers, educational institution, in classroom, or in school and colleges? These are the questions. And is the new approach or method very complicated or different to understand or use? Is it it's more complicated in comparison to the methods we have in our hand at present? And has it been tested out in some schools and classrooms before teachers are expected to use it? So as I have said, that means their approach and methods are there, and there is a claim. That means whether the method or approach will be effective or not, that should be tested by the language learners' attitude and temperaments. Okay, so if a new method comes across, will it be tested? So these questions will come in the minds. Have the benefits of the new approach or method been clearly communicated to teachers or institutions? How clear and practical is the new approach or method? Are its expectations stated in ways that clearly show how it can be used in the classroom? So these are the key issues. So we started, that means we have 20 methods and approach in our hand, but we are not happy. What is going to happen after method? That means the post-method era. So if a new method comes across, does this method fulfill the requirements that we have come across with that questions? These are the questions. And some suggestion is there. Okay, that how that question can be answered, and there is an approach that is a top-down criticism. Top-down criticism, that means whenever a new approach will be implemented, that you have to start with the top means the teachers level, how the teachers believe. Naturally in Bangladesh, we are following CLT, isn't it? But the teachers who are teaching at present, they have come up with the GTM background. So their belief that GTM is more appropriate. And for this reason, they are following CLT, but always their belief that GTM is the good method. So in case of a new method, we have to judge a method, we have to judge the method in such a way that is how teacher will accept that, how institution will accept that, and then we have to judge the learners. So from teachers, institution, education planner, then teachers, then students. That is the top-down criticism in case of. Oh, we started the question in why we are discussing this. We are discussing that if a new approach comes in our hand, what will be happening, and the role of contextual factors. As I have said, there are 3,500 languages in this world. Approximately 5,000 languages are there in this world, and among them 1,500 languages are dead languages. That means the last speaking person of the language has died, and for this reason it is called dead language, is it? So we can compare that 3,500 languages are here in this world. That means 3,500 contexts are there in this world. So it is not so easy to make every contextual learner happy with a single method. So if a new method comes approach, then we have to think that whether this method will be appropriate for Bangladesh, India, Singapore and some other countries or not. Okay, that is the contextual factors. And especially in the post-method era, it is also called the post-method pedagogy of English language teaching. And that is the most challenge in post-method pedagogy or post-method era, that the contextual factors. Why it will be appropriate in this culture or not. You can apply any method, but how this will be accepted in a certain context, whether it will be applied appropriately in the context of Bulgaria, Hungary, Singapore or not. So the contextual factors, and for this reason in post-method era, one of the key issues that we have to discuss that is the contextual situation, whether it will be contextualized or not. Okay. And again, another issues in case of the post-method pedagogy. So we again and again, I am repeating that why we are discussing this. We are discussing this that at present we have more than 20 approaches and methods in our hand, but we are not happy. So if what will happen after method era, that means the post-method era. So if a new approach comes, then we have to think these questions, that means the top-down criticism, then the contextual factors, and the third one is the need for curriculum development process. Another challenge that will be the careful examination during all available sources of knowledge and informed judgment of the teaching objectives, whether in particular subject courses or over the curriculum as a whole. So the curriculum planners, you know that every country will have a curriculum. Curriculum, that means whole body. Syllabus is the syllabus that you are studying in this course. That is the fragment part of a syllabus, of a curriculum. Curriculum, what is the objective? That means in English language curriculum that it will be mentioned that what you want to achieve if you follow this method, What you want to achieve? That means you want to achieve the speaking fluency. You want to achieve the written competency. You want to achieve the listening competency. So in a curriculum, it will be mentioned that what you are accepted from this speaking curriculum. That is called the objective of a curriculum. In case of the second language speaking, the curriculum should state that what you want the learners will be after following this curriculum. Am I clear? That means it will be said that in case of GTM curriculum will be there, that will be appropriate in reading and writing. In case of CLT, the curriculum will be stated that you will be appropriate in oral communication. So, in case of post-method pedagogy, you have to think that how it will be mentioned in curriculum. What will be the objectives? And what will be the assessment of this? The assessment of the extent. One thing here over there, in case of CLT, that means we are following all over in Bangladesh at present, that we are following CLT. But CLT is speaking and listening. But in secondary and higher secondary level, there is no listening test. So, in post-method pedagogy or post-method era, you have to think that what will be the assessment system, how you will assess the listening capability of a learner, how will you assess the speaking capability. Speaking capability for the viva voce, you can do it, yes. But for what will be happening for the listening? So, assessment in curriculum, that will also happen in case of post-method era or the post-method pedagogy. The final element is therefore of the feedback. Of all experience gained to provide a starting point of the further study. Feedback, feedback, that means whenever a curriculum will be established or set up, that means there are seven stakeholders. Stakeholders, that means institution. What does an institution hope from a curriculum? What does a teacher hope? What does a learner hope? What does a guardian expect? Okay, so these are the stakeholders, and what is their expectation, and how they will be feeling having a new method. That is called feedback. In case of CLT, some years ago, there was an interview that some students, they have got CGPA 5, and there was a situation that they said that I am CGPA 5, isn't it? So after getting such kind of appreciation, the feedback of the guardian, they said that yes, our children can speak well, but they are not grammatically correct. So that is their feedback. So in case of post-method era, that you have to understand, and that is called feedback. What are guardians thinking? What are the institutions thinking? What are the teachers thinking? And what are the learners thinking as well? So feedback will also be necessary in case of post-method. And another thing, in case of if you take 1 or 2 minutes, it will get cold. Okay? And take a deep breath so that you have come after running. Yeah, is it? I am not quite sure. Actually, third portion is that is the lack of research basis. Again and again, I have said that we have several approaches and methods in our hand, but all are not tested. All are not tested. Actually, we haven't discussed about Carson's monitor model, isn't it? No, most probably not. Next semester you will be dealing with that. Okay, there are several hypotheses. That is the natural approaches. Okay, and at present, many theories we have in case of language teaching, especially the second language teaching. Keep your hand out of your cheeks. Yeah. So, second language teaching, we have several approaches. Hypothesis. Hypothesis means, Stephen Carson has said that the comprehensible input will be the better way of learning language. So natural hypothesis. And in case of post-method pedagogy, that means the post-method era, we are getting so many language learning approaches, but that are the hypotheses, that are the imagination. That means if we learn language in such a way, language learning will be appropriate. That means it is said by X, Y, or Z. Your name is not Jet. Yeah. Okay. So many linguists say so, is it? But they are not tested. They are not research getting the approach and method in proper way, except such as Krashen's researcher who study language learning are themselves usually reluctant to dispense prescriptions for teaching based on the result of the research, because they know the current knowledge is tentative. The current knowledge, that means that we are getting here, that is tentative, partial and changing. Why it is happening? That means the lack of empirical research in case of language learning method and pedagogy. That is okay. And another portion, that is similarity of the classroom practices. Okay. And whatever maybe, okay, you may hear the story, that is the crocodile story. One man, if you want to ask him write an essay, everybody will get the essay towards the pond and the crocodile will go into the okay. So in case of the language learner and the teachers, what will be there? Many methods and approaches may come in post method era, but if the teachers, that means it's a question, that means that if the teachers are following the same method, then this fourth method pedagogy will not be appropriate. That means similarity will be happening. That means in my belief, I have CLT in my belief, I have GCM in my method. So whatever the new method come approach, then I will be dealing as similar as CLT or GCM. That is another challenge of fourth method era. Okay. And beyond approaches and methods. So why? So after getting so many approaches and methods and so many questions in our mind, so what alternative approaches to the study of teaching are available outside the framework of the brand name approaches or methods? What might be the other? So having so many questions in our mind, then what will be happening? The scenario of language teaching, especially the foreign language or second language teaching. The big questions comes in our mind. Mainstream approaches and methods draw on a large amount of collective experience and practices from which much can be learned. Approaches and methods can therefore be usually studied and selectively mastered in order to learn. Okay, so if a method or approach can fulfill this one, to learn how to use different approaches and methods and understand what they might be useful. Okay, so whatever may be happening in the post-method era, that method or approach should be useful for the teachers and the learners. Okay, to understand some of the issues and controversies and the characteristics of the history of the language teaching, to participate in language learning experience based on different approaches and methods as a basis for reflection and comparison, and to be aware of the set of resources available to the imaginative teachers, to appropriate how theory and practice can be linked from a variety of perspectives. So whatever may be the scenario happening in the post-method era, that method should be appropriate, and method should be linked with practice and linked to with the theory, and whether it will be appropriate or not. Okay, but in this method the teachers and the teachers in training need to be able to approach and method flexible and creativity. So in the method, his suggestion claims that method should not be guide the language learning. Language learning and teaching should be guided by the teachers. So for this reason, the education planners and the learners and the teachers should be flexible and creative. Okay. So if I stick to one method, then that would not be the scenario in post-method era. In the post-method era, teachers and learners should be flexible. What will be suited for the teacher will be following this. Even the teacher will be creative. That means having so many methods and practices and approaches in the hand, teacher will apply some new method from his hand, from his head. That is called the creative. In the post-method era, no method will fulfill the requirements of the language learner, and for this reason, teacher should be flexible and okay. So you have several ways to go in a destination. Your destination is that you have to learn or you have to teach second language. Being a teacher, you should be practical, you should be flexible, and you should be creative. You have to study the learner's age. Suppose you are following CLT, so that CLT will not be similarly applicable to secondary level, higher secondary level and tertiary level. So, being a teacher in the post-method era, you have to be flexible. That means in CLT you will be following in school level in a different way, in higher secondary level in a different way, and in tertiary level in a different way. So you have to be flexible and you have also to be creative. And the method is that two things comes in the mind of post-method pedagogy, that whether it will be appropriate, whether it will be interactive, and whether it will be useful or not. So whatever, in which way it will be appropriate and useful, teachers should be like that. Teachers will not be stick to a single method. And he has to be, and he have to sacrifice his personal belief as well. The teacher should sacrifice. Okay, if he may study it in GTA, following GTA. He may study it in his when I was in schools, colleges and universities, okay, there was a portion that is this antonym and synonym. Okay, that means if I think that my students will be better if I teach them antonym and synonym, that would not be effective in post-method era. They have to create a new one, and they have to create something new for the requirements in the 21st century. So, a teacher should sacrifice his belief in post-method era. He or she has to come out of his previous belief. That means what you teach, in which way you will be teaching. Actually, the way you have attended your classes at university, if you become a teacher, you will try to follow that method, isn't it? In post-method era, no. You have attended the class in university, your teachers took class in such a way, you will not be following that. You have to follow your own. That means according to post-method era. Okay. So he or she has to sacrifice his belief and principles regard to the following: his or her role in the classroom, the nature of effective teaching and learning, how a teacher should be effective. Actually, in many of our class, you see that in the tertiary level, I tried to make you involved. In which way? I asked you to read some slides. So I thought that it would be appropriate so that you will be involved in the class participation. Okay, so in such a way, what you will think, actually in a class, naturally, 10 students might involved in slide reading. What will be the other 20 students? Okay, so you as a teacher in post-method pedagogy, you have to determine that which is the effective way to involve every learner in the learning process. That means the introduction and the contextual understanding is a must in post-method era or post-method pedagogy. Some questions, these are okay, and you have to keep this in case of the post-method era. That means you will not stick to one method. You will not be stick to your belief. You have to be careful about maintaining these issues. What is that? Engage all the learners in the lesson. Make learners, not the teachers, the focus of the lesson. Provide maximum opportunities for students' participation. Develop learners' responsibility. Be tolerant of learners' mistakes. Okay. And develop learners' confidence. Okay. Of course you can. So the way you have to keep being a post method teachers, you have to remain. You have to keep these principles in your mind. Yeah. Teach learning strategies. Respond to learners' difficulties and build on them. Yeah. Any learner may come up with a problem. Try to stick to the problem, how that problem can be eradicated. You will not say, oh, what kind of problem you are coming. No, not like that. Okay. So, use a maximum amount of student to student activities. Okay. So, one thing actually in one class, most probably will follow. That means the repeating, that means total physical response. Okay. There you involve. But I showed something and you did that. Okay. It is not like will be happening in the post-method era. You have to engage every participant, student to student, to have the effective language learning and teaching. Promote cooperation among learners. Practice both accuracy and fluency. Address learners' need and interest. Okay, so with all this, the post-method